Question: has the length of time since the Reagan assassination attempt eroded the Secret Service's sense of risk, do you think? Eleanor Clift.
Well, I think it's possible that some complacency has set in, and I think if you're, patrolling the White House, for all that it's been penetrated now, but if you're ever over there, it's like an armed camp. I mean, as a reporter, you have to go through several checkpoints. It's not easy to get into, and so I think agents who sit in guardhouses and walk around the perimeter, probably their attention wanders sometime, and that is unacceptable. So I think, the Secret Service as a whole, I mean, everybody I've ever dealt with is very professional. There are a few people that are not doing their job. I think it's a question of management, and I think it's a question of resources. They don't have enough money. And Julia Pearson, I think she was installed in that job because it was thought that she could, merely because of her gender, change that sort of frat boy, devil-may-care attitude that had infected the service, particularly on overseas trips. But, she apparently comes out of the same bureaucratic attitude, and she failed. And I give her a lot of credit for resigning as quickly as she did.
Wait a minute, before you have your questions, how many presidents were assassinated?
4 have been assassinated: Kennedy,
Garfield,
Lincoln, Garfield,
Kennedy,
McKinley. And listen, Harry
Who's the fourth?
McKinley and President Kennedy and Garfield and McKinley and Lincoln. But John, look,
how
Ronald
many
Reagan
altogether?
was
Four?
shot.
Four on about how many presidents?
You've had about 43 now. But here's the thing: Ronald Reagan was shot. Harry Truman, they attempted to assassinate him right in front of Blair House. Teddy Roosevelt took a bullet, but that's when he was out of the Oval Office. But also Gerald Ford was fired at twice. Look, the Secret Service, and I had the fortune to have their protection, they're outstanding people. They got a tremendous reputation. They put their lives on the line for you. They're great guys. But something has happened when somebody jumps over the fence, runs through the White House lawn, pushes over the gal at the door of the White House, which isn't locked, and is running around the East Room, and it's stopped by a Secret Service guy who was leaving the building.
So something's wrong?
Something is terribly, terribly wrong, and there's other incidents that 7 shots were fired at the White House, and they didn't tell the president.
How come they gave you Secret Service protection? Did they think you were president?
No, because as Jimmy Carter said about Andrew Young, they thought I was, quote, a national treasure at that particular time.
Have you put that in your columns? Why don't you just sign yourself instead of
They're
Buchanan?
Great guys.
A national treasure.
I've got a dozen stories about them, and they're the greatest guys you'll ever run into.
What are the Brits saying about this?
I don't know that the Brits are covering it that much. From my own perspective, though, I actually did some work as a summer job in protection at Wimbledon. It's very difficult. Clearly, the Secret Service, it's at the highest level of difficulty. They're walking the rope line. They don't know if it's a suicide bomb or someone with a gun. Tennis players at Wimbledon.
Tennis players,
yeah, okay, but it's a much lower level. But the point of protection is that it's immensely difficult. For the elevator example, that's something that
you mean the man in the elevator?
Yeah, that's something that actually sometimes you're not going to be able to avoid because the advance agent is going to go there. There's a lot of trust placed on the hosting organization in the government to tell them.
You got to do. Look, if it's somebody you don't know, when I was there, they had the elevator clear. My sister could have gotten on. They knew her. But if they didn't know somebody, they'd say, please wait for the next elevator.
Mort, what are your impressions?
Well, I mean, there's clearly been some kind of a breakdown on some level. I mean, you can't imagine that this is going to happen. There have been several incidents that have really undermined the general confidence in this critical agency. So what they clearly need is different leadership, and they're going to get it. And they're going to have to really review a lot of their procedures, because we came this close to a major disaster in this country.
What about the chap that, what's his name, Gonzalez? Should the Secret Service have used legal force against Gonzalez? Yes or no?
No. First of all, the first family wasn't there. So, and I think the agent's guard goes down somewhat, and he is a mentally disturbed gentleman. And I think he'd been hanging around the White House to some extent.
Letting him get inside the White House was a complete failure of security that could have had horrific consequences if he were wearing a suicide bomber's vest.
John, what you should have done is had the snipers on the roof have rubber bullets. And as soon as they got over the fence, take him down with those, which wouldn't kill him. They'd knock him down, but you can't shoot a guy that climbs over the fence.
For a quick comment from you about Joe Clancy. You know who Joe Clancy is?
He's the new head of the agency.
Do you know Joe?
No, but Bill Clancy was head of my part of my details. I don't know that he's related.
John? They should get built.
The first family has a comfort level with him because he was the head of the detail for their first 2 years in the White House. And so he is their personal selection. He also was there when the Salahis made their way into the state dinner. But
who wrote
nobody's holding that against him for the moment.
What
anyway.
former Secret Service worker, man, was protecting the Kennedys? Right. And he was
Clint Hill, right?
Clint Hill. He wrote a book, right?
Yeah.
Very moving book.
Clint Eastwood did a movie in which he was that Secret Service agent.
What's the book called?
I don't know, but I'm just going to make one comment on who should be the next director.
Remember yet, usually. No,
No,
he wrote
Dan
a book.
Emmett
The name is Clinton Hill. For those who are interested in this issue, it's a very moving book about how he almost made it to where he could have used his own body to protect Kennedy. It was after the first bullet, but before the second.
He's the one the First Lady reached out to.
Issue 3, Hong Kong Heat.
Supporters call it the Umbrella Revolution. Tens of thousands of pro-democracy protesters, mostly students, have jammed the streets of Hong Kong around the clock, deploying umbrellas to protect against rain, sun, and when the police spray it, tear gas and pepper spray. Ordinary citizens are lending their support, calling for C.Y. Leung, Hong Kong's chief executive and also its top politician, to resign. How did Hong Kong get to this point? A decision by Beijing, China's seat of government, to vet all candidates who want to run in the 2017 election for the powerful office of Hong Kong's chief executive. Hong Kong has long enjoyed a special status as compared to mainland China, ever since the British returned their former colony to China in 1997, 17 years ago. China back then agreed to a quote-unquote one country, two systems policy that has allowed Hong Kong, a flourishing financial hub of China with 7.1 million residents, an independent judiciary and press freedoms that are currently forbidden on the mainland. But after China's current president, Xi Jinping, took control in 2013, last year, restrictions have been tightened, including on public dissent and the use of social media, disallowing Hong Kong residents to choose their own candidates in an open and fair election now puts Beijing in a conundrum. It is unclear how long the Communist Party will tolerate such revolt, especially because of its spill potential into other parts of China. On the other hand, the legacy and memory of 1989's Tiananmen Square, when China violently cracked down on an earlier generation of student protesters, still lingers, and a repeat would cause not only chaos and death, but also condemnation from the West.
What is Xi Jinping going to do?
I think he's going to let them have a bit of a leash, John, until they tick off enough people in Hong Kong. But if push comes to shove and he's got to crack down, he will do it. This man is not going to back down.
Eleanor.
Well, I think he's going to try to wait out the protesters, just like the capitalists in New York waited out the Wall Street, the anti-Wall Street crowd. Hong Kong is the economic engine for China. It's their New York. If he does a severe crackdown, that would only, I think, cause protests to spread on the mainland.
I think he doesn't give up, but I also think the broader issue in China is that there are big problems in terms of separation of wealth between very poor rural populations and rich in the urban area. And I think in the future, as China's export model becomes more difficult to maintain, they're going to have major social problems.
About 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a real clash between an educated, well-to-do population and a much less, shall we say, successful population. He's going to have to find a way to reconcile those two.
Okay, the U.S. and Hong Kong.
1,400 U.S. firms are situated in Hong Kong. U.S. companies enjoy the city's business environment, legal system, low taxation, solid infrastructure. And over 60,000 U.S. residents live in Hong Kong. Last year, U.S. goods and private services trade with Hong Kong totaled $64 billion. U.S. exports to Hong Kong totaled $51 billion, while imports from Hong Kong to the U.S. totaled $13 billion, a $39 billion trade surplus in favor of the U.S. China's Communist Party has accused the West of abetting the protests. The party's main newspaper, People's Daily, claims that the activists in the streets of Hong Kong have sought support from quote-unquote anti-China forces in the UK and the U.S. and called them a, quote, gang of people besotted with Western democracy, unquote. Secretary of State John Kerry met with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Wednesday and said this.
And as China knows, we support universal suffrage in Hong Kong according with the basic law. And we believe an open society with the highest possible degree of autonomy and governed by rule of law is essential for Hong Kong's stability and prosperity. And we have high hopes that the Hong Kong authorities will exercise restraint and respect the protesters' right to express their views peacefully.
Foreign Minister Wang had this response.
Hong Kong affairs are China's internal affairs. All countries should respect China's sovereignty.
Question: why are Chinese authorities blaming the unrest on American meddling? I ask you.
Well, because they don't want to address their own internal difficulties in terms of the absence of democracy and the rule of law. And I think it's appropriate and right that the United States is making, Secretary Kerry deserves credit for doing that, because, you know what, the Chinese government's engagement with the United States was cyber espionage, the restriction of their own people's freedom, bullying their neighbors, Vietnam, Philippines, and the broader vein of what they aim to bring to the world in terms of global politics deserves to be confronted internally and externally.
Wait a minute, what's the broader aim?
Of China or of the United States?
Of China.
Well, I think the broader aim of China is to be the world's next superpower and to continue with the domination of the Chinese Communist Party.
You don't think it's a superpower already?
Yeah. Not yet, but it's getting there.
Xi Jinping has been talking to Vladimir Putin, who believes, not wrongly, that the United States uses NGOs, the National Endowment for Democracy, all these agencies, democracy agencies, if you will, to subvert their governments. Putin believes that's what happened in Ukraine, that's what happened in Serbia, that's what happened in Kyrgyzstan, that's what happened in Georgia. He's told Xi Jinping, and you're going to watch, these NGOs are going to be more and more an issue, and they're going to be expelled from the
An NGO is a non-governmental organization, correct?
Right.
Why didn't you do it that way instead of...
But because they're called NGOs, and they feel...
They're called, you're using this jargon to try to...
well, that's what the jargon that is being used by Putin.
Well, we don't need that opacity.
Yeah,
we don't need it.
China has promised Hong Kong universal suffrage. That's part of the deal. So I thought what Secretary Kerry said was pretty anodyne. And the Onion, which is the satirical newspaper, its headline was Obama to Hong Kong, another issue we're not going to pay attention to. I mean, the president has really not gotten involved in this, and blaming internal unrest on outside agitators has a long history. It goes back to the civil rights episodes in the South here.
Suppose Beijing uses violence to break up the protesters. What should President Obama do?
Well, he's not going to do anything in the way of using force or anything like that. That is just outside of the bounds.
You hit them in the pocketbook?
In one form or another, and I think there will be a major opportunity to use that as a platform in which to go after the Chinese for the kind of state that they have developed.
Could Jack Lew declare China to be a currency manipulator?
I don't think that that's what's involved here.
When you want to bring the markets down crashing, you get into an economic sanctions war with China.
Yeah, and you don't pick a fight with your banker, I don't think.
Which is the stronger market, Hong Kong or Wall Street?
Oh, no, Wall Street is still the strongest market
Hong Kong,
by far. Yes.
Hong Kong is 3% of China's economy.
Which is the stronger city, Hong Kong or New York?
Oh, I would take New York as well.
Which is the stronger index, Dow Jones or Hang Seng?
New York.
The United States will remain the world's sole superpower.
Right on. And you're not a Brit, or you are a Brit?
I'm a U.S. citizen. I don't like this teasing abuse because of my accent. We're a country of immigrants.
Okay, pal. You can vote. Predictions, Pat.
Ebola virus contained here, but it explodes in West Africa.
Eleanor.
A half a dozen Republican-led states will accept Medicaid under Obamacare after the November election.
Tom.
In the November elections, it's going to be 52-48 for the Republicans taking the Senate.
Bart.
The housing market is going to continue to weaken, and this is going to create a wider impact on the already weak economy.
If ISIS makes good on its threat to slaughter the families of American troops here in their homes in the United States, the pressure on President Obama to launch an all-out attack will be unbearable. It will trigger a full-scale American assault on ISIS and its sponsors in the Middle East. Bye-bye.